Hello and welcome back to Magic in the Noise. Today we are sharing exciting remote viewing data. We are talking about biohybrid brains on computer chips, and we're going to talk about, are those brains having any kind of awareness and experience of consciousness at all? And if they are, is it a positive or negative one? Before we dive into the data, let's all introduce ourselves. So I'm Sasha. I'm co-founder of Magic in the Noise with David. I am a remote viewing instructor. I do remote viewing analysis, and I'm trying to build a think tank centered around remote viewing with David. And so that consumes pretty much all of my time. David?
Yep. Hi, I'm David. I'm the other part, the other half. I'm experiencing a little bit of technical difficulty, so it's difficult for me to communicate, but I'll let you move on to the other viewers.
Claudia?
Hi, I'm Claudia. I'm from the Netherlands. I work on remote viewing now for a few years. I'm very grateful and happy to be part of this group. And well, I'm happy to attend. I'm working with the full illumination from Sasha. Sorry, I had slipped my mind. But I love this kind of method of remote viewing much more than CRV. So I'm happy to have learned it from you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Claudia. That's wonderful. And John?
So Jeff from the Chicago area, HRVG trained remote viewer, and I'm having a great day. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you all here. And Chris?
Hey everyone, I'm Chris. So I've been doing remote viewing for a few years now. I'm also using Sasha's method, and I'm really happy with it. So that's my go-to method as of today. As usual, I'm very happy to be here, and I really like the target. So I'm happy to start.
Nice. Thank you, Chris. And then John?
Hi, I'm John from Kansas City. I am trained in the TDRV methodology, and I've been remote viewing now for a little over a year. And that's it. Happy to be here.
Very nice. Happy to have you. And Cody?
I'm Cody. I've been remote viewing for about 4.5 years, and the method I use is CRV.
Yeah, perfect. And so we're very happy, excuse me, to have all the viewers here. We're happy to have the audience here. If there are people in chat, do leave questions or comments, because we will be incorporating those into the show. And for the viewers, as usual, jump in with questions, with comments. We really want to know, what was your experience with the data, especially for something like this one. I think that's going to add a lot to the information. And so the target was the new technology, biohybrid robot on a chip. And so this is something new that they've been developing for a few years, and now they're publicly talking about it. And I think we've seen whispers of it in the media now and then over the years, but now they're coming out and saying this is what we're doing, which means that they're concerns about how the masses, the public, will accept the ethical ramifications of using human brain parts to power chips. They're pretty confident that we're not going to revolt or fight it too much. So that in and of itself, I think, is an interesting finding, an interesting development, I guess. And so here's a little bit how it works. So we look at muscles in the body like the heart that spontaneously move. The heart does its thing. You don't have to consciously push it to beat. It's just spontaneous motion of the muscle. And then we have the muscles that you're consciously trying to move, and you're using electrical, usually signals to do that. In the labs, they also use optical, so they use light as well as electrical energy to get muscle tissue to expand and contract. And then here's a nice little image of the brain. the wiring goes from the brain into your motor neurons. Your motor neurons are the ones that attach to muscle tissue in your body, and that's what makes your muscles move. And so for these biohybrid robots on a chip, they take advantage of that, and they take small chunks of motor neurons, and they make these little cluster brainlet things. So it's not a complete brain, but it's parts of a brain. So it has the motor neurons, and then they take a chunk of the brain that does the processing. And then in some that we'll see in a moment, they take the midbrain. And so that's a little bit more curious, because when you get closer to the center of your brain, you're getting to the thalamus, you're getting to the parts of the brain that process and integrate all your sensory experience of the world. And what they do is then they attach that to a paddle made out of muscle tissue. And then they add neurotransmitter, they add chemicals that the brains react to make the muscle tissue expand or contract. And that's how they have the gating system for these chips. So hopefully that was clear. If anyone has questions about the basics of that, about how that works, just jump in and ask. And then one of the things that I wanted from the viewers was to describe the setup, describe the biohybrid chip, but also as a subtask, I cued them with, let me know if there's some kind of awareness, some conscious experience of existing. And if there is, tell me a little bit about it. And we'll see that the remote viewers did bring back, I would say, a little bit shocking data about the experiences that these brainlets may be having. We don't really understand consciousness very well. Science doesn't really understand consciousness very well. What causes it to arise? Is it fundamental, or is it an epiphenomenon of brain activity? Is, if you have any very complex machine, will it eventually just start thinking and being aware of itself, of its own thoughts? So I think with artificial intelligence, everyone's kind of thinking about this. And so I thought that this would be a nice way to probe that. So here's the basic model where you have the cerebral part. So this is the more the outer brain, and then you have the motor neuron spheroid. So this is the ball of neurons that are going to act on the muscle tissue to make it expand or contract. And here's just an example of how they use different parts of the brain to test different ways of doing this. And they use different chemicals to make different parts of the brain activate the muscle. And you can see that what's happening is the brain is just floating in this environment without a body. And then these little tiny brainlets, so little small cluster brains, they're all attached. And again, they're existing in these unnatural combinations. And then they're hooked up to this paddle. And this paddle is being made to contract and expand, and contract and expand. And so there's no external purpose yet. These are just tests. And so it's a bit of a meaningless activity. So it's interesting to see how the brain will make sense of that. And so to start off, we have John Dixon's work. John Dixon isn't with us at the moment. I don't know if he's going to join us later. We hope so, but we still have his data to present. And so he has basically drawn the biohybrid robot on a chip. He has the brainlet as a gear that's spinning. He has the paddles themselves as something that's expanding. There's motion there. There's a sense of time involved here. And there's something energetic in the center that's pushing things apart. And when he's describing this object, and he has the retractable bridge, which I thought was a really perfect explanation or description of the muscle bundle. When he's describing this, he describes it as being aware. So that was the first clue that there's some suggestions already that there might be an awareness. And then here we have, John, your data. What was really shocking to me here was that fairly early in your session, you mentioned this feeling of betrayal. And that concerns me if you're picking up on the conscious experience of these brains and the idea of being chained. So you also have that it reminds you of Tron. So do you want to say a few things about your data here?
Yeah, the feeling betrayed. I had a number of perceptions that were kind of along those lines, but yeah, that was kind of when I was trying to pick up on the emotions of the target. And the Tron one was I almost didn't write it down because it was so faint and it was actually in between probes, so I wasn't actually actively trying to probe the target, but it just and I was like, that's got to be something because I don't think of Tron very often or ever. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, cool target. Strange data.
And for the audience or anyone who's not quite aware, Tron, it's a movie. They remade it, or they made a sequel to it. I think maybe years ago, and it's about humans that get sucked into video games. Is that right, David? You should be, or John. Actually, John, why don't you describe the movie? Because I'm trying to remember a movie that I saw maybe parts of.
That's basically it in a nutshell. That's basically in a nutshell. I mean, more or less. But another thing I thought was interesting, and I don't think this maybe not be in the slides, but on the first page, I also said something reminds me of the Old West, and I watch a lot of movies, so I associate a lot of things with movies. But what was that show on HBO? The
Westworld.
Westworld. I watched that, and Westworld, it's all those like robots have like muscle tissue and stuff. So as soon as I saw what the target was, that immediately clicked. So anyway, that was interesting. 2 movies.
That's a great data point, because that actually, again, for the audience, Westworld, it's basically android robots that look like humans, that they have muscle tissue, and they also develop sentience, awareness of themselves, their own experience, that they are alive. And it's interesting. I'm grateful to you for having added that detail, John, because I didn't process it when I was doing my analysis. Jeff also has some cowboy western themes in his session. Now that makes more sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, with Tron, I mean, the general concept is, in a way, you could see it as consciousness in a machine, our consciousness in a machine, right? So they go into this machine world, but also you could just see it as actually their consciousness moves into, which is similar to some of the stuff that you're exploring here within the remote viewing work, which is, again, it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And so then, and even here, it's really clear as soon as I saw this in your session, it's clear that this is the target, right? You have this motion flowing between these two sides. And so that was really interesting. And then here, there a number of viewers experienced the contraction and the expansion of this muscle tissue that's enforced. It's forced by chemicals that they're adding to the brains, essentially forcing the brain to react. And a lot of people did experience it as two life forms that are fighting, or there's a battle, there's this conflict, there's this push and pull. And so that seemed to be a bit of a recurring theme across the sessions. So I thought that was really, really nice data. And then the strapping, fastening, securing. Again, I think you can interpret this on 2 levels. One is that everything, like the brainlets, everything is strapped down in a natural fashion. But I also wonder about their consciousness, right? The fact that you have the sense of chains, the sense of feeling betrayal, that's something to think about. Cody, you focus more on the chip at this part of your session. And it was amazing to see, because you're talking about technology and this kind of chip, and then you bring in the idea of surgery, and there's a scalpel on the chip, and that's so perfect because that's exactly what they're doing, right? They're doing a surgical, taking these little brains and cutting them out of bigger brains, and then they're implanting them and putting them on the chip. So I'd love to hear how you experience this data.
Yeah, it was a really quick session, so this was really early on. Yeah, I just moved to it, and it just seemed like a microchip, but as I was sketching it, so that scalpel was supposed to be a soldering iron, and then as I'm going through it, I'm like, hang on, it might be a knife. So had no idea what the hell I was viewing, because it was just seemed so odd to me. But yeah, I didn't explore it that much, but it just kept coming back through my session.
But that's the mark of a great remote viewer, is that they don't censor themselves when something doesn't make sense. So you have this chip, you know it's a chip, you're describing it as a chip and technology, and then now there's a scalpel there, there's a knife. That doesn't make sense, but you put it anyway, and you're reporting the data as it's coming through. And I think that that's important for viewers to understand. Don't prejudge, don't decide, oh, I know what this is, it's this, so then I'm going to exclude all the data that doesn't fit with that idea that I have. So great job on that. Also, I was looking at so they have the different forms that they put these chips in. And this is one of the images. And I think it matches your sketch really, really well. So I think you had an amazing level of detail. Like I really do see there's the round part here for the organoids, the brainlets, and then there's the indentation here, and the two elevated parts here, and that matches one of the models. So yeah, really, really good data here, really good drawings.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
agree.
yeah. And then John, we're back to you. So you started with this idea of it's like a necklace, but when you look at your drawing, it really does look like the brainlet with the chain of motor neuron spheroids around it. And you have this like downward motion. I would say a lot of people did have this explosive reaction kind of data. And so I do see the brain as being forced to move the muscle bundle as feeling like that kind of an explosion. Everyone picked up on the spheroids. Yeah, everyone picked up on these balls. And so we're going to see that throughout the presentation today. Did you want to say anything about this, John?
Not really. I didn't really get. I mean, the data. I just got that data. There wasn't much to it. And the balls, the little spheroids, I got those multiple times, and I just didn't know what they were. But it's interesting now that when I saw Target, it's pretty funny.
Yes, yeah. And also you'll see a lot of you picked up on the three of them, and then you have a smaller one. It's a bit of a mirror effect, which we often see in remote viewing. So there's three small ones and a slightly bigger one. But you will see the three balls coming through in a lot of people's data. And then why don't you walk us through a little bit of your data here?
Okay. On the left, I was getting something extending out or rolling out, the idea of going below. I think that was pretty early in my session where I had subjects interacting, maybe non-human. That might have been on my first page, which was strange because it's like I could.
Right.
I had the perception of these subjects, but for whatever reason, they just didn't seem human. But nothing other specific than that. And then up the top of the C, I got the ball of plasma again, or whatever that was. I was trying to describe it. It had color. It kind of had darkness, but it wasn't like solid dense. It was kind of like a little bit translucent or something like that. I got controlled operated. The idea of sending message or signals, that came through a lot in my session. And then I heard an alarm bell at one point. Communication occurs from wherever to wherever, location from above to below. And I had that person walking across that kind of tightrope thing. And I think my word description is like very careful movements. I didn't know what that was. So maybe that had to do with the movements of the actual muscle that were kind of slow and specific, or maybe it had something to do, I don't know, but that was interesting. And I didn't know what and then the bottom right, like closing a door and keeping it shut with force. I'm not sure what that was. I still don't know what that was as far as relevant to the target, to be honest. So if anyone has ideas.
Again, I think that there are different ways of interpreting it. And one of the ways is I kind of thought, because the brain doesn't have other input to understand what's going on and what it's doing, and it doesn't have feedback from any other sensory input. So it knows that it's contracting the muscle and then it's relaxing. And so I think, but it doesn't understand why it's doing that, because it's not doing it in response to something that it's perceiving. It's doing it in response to neurotransmitters that are being flooded into just around the tissues or injected into it. And so at this point in my analysis, I thought, is it kind of the same as a door closing and opening? It's expansion and contraction, and it's just this motion. But then I also think, and we'll see this in Jeff's data a little bit as well later on in the presentation, I also think that there's this idea of a door opening, maybe the sentience aspect of it coming through. But we can look at that a little bit later. The alarm bell, that was a little bit weird. And again, that idea of it reads as the awareness experiencing something, right? So it's being flooded with chemicals that say, okay, and then it reacts, and then the motor neurons pull the muscle tissue either together or apart. And so I wonder if it just feels like this panic kind of sensation. So, and we'll see in other people's data as we move through it, we can start piecing these things together. But I did think that this was, I think, on your first or second page of your data layout. And so it was really, really accurate. So that was really good to see you hit the ground running in your session in terms of your target contact. Really good. And then here, Chris, you also have the balls again. Everyone's picking up on those. So we have the small objects for John. Jeff, you also have the 3 and then the 2 in the container. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about the data here?
Yeah, so I really got an image of these kind of multiple balls like this. I wrote bouncing like bubbles because they were kind of moving. And yeah, so I probed to ask myself why are these relevant? And yeah, what I got was that it's part of the movement, a whole from the small like a multiverse, in the sense that it's something small that make a whole. So that's what I got there. Then here on the left, I had that feeling that it was something sensitive / sensible. This is like a Frenchism. So I wasn't sure which one I had to put, but I put it somewhere else as well. It's something fragile. And I got like the visual of like a kid hiding in a corner about something fragile. So that's kind of the aspects I got.
And we're going to talk about the hidden aspect a little bit later. But the sensible, so for the audience, because Chris speaks French, I speak French, so sometimes I'll see things, it's a Frenchism, like you said, where you're trying to translate something. And so basically you're saying sentient, right? It has an awareness, it has insensibility, right? So I thought that was really good for this particular target. Yeah. And also the splicing.
Still on that one, I really had that feeling of something not like shy, but something like a child hiding in a corner that doesn't really want to be seen, like hiding.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how that felt? Because it's important if we're trying to understand the nature of the experience of the brains that are on these robots. So how was the child like? How was it feeling? Was it hiding or was it being hidden? What was your experience?
It was hiding because it wasn't like feeling like it wanted to be in the spotlight. And I think that can be linked to something I have that will probably be on the slides later on. When I probed for life at the target, life or energy, I got a weird, very thin looking person that was having very small, not small, but very light emotions. So it was feeling very neutral, but still with a bit of sadness. So I thought that was interesting because if there is some kind of sentience or small bit of consciousness in that thing, sorry to call it like that, then yeah, I guess if it is kind of aware of something, it wouldn't feel super joyful. It would be a bit like neutral because that's also what I wrote, and we'll see later, but that it's kind of its job to do that, but it's feeling like neutral about it, but still with a bit of sadness.
Yes. And we'll see later, I've kind of put everyone's data together in relation to that. But as we were just looking at John's work, where he's, picks up on a sense of betrayal. And then your work is talking about a sense of sadness. So we're going to see it in other people's work as well. Let me go back to this. Yeah. And then Claudia, you picked up on this as well. So you have the brain, you have the brainlets, something that I think John said a moment ago about being in darkness. And again, so the human brain has evolved or adapted or been created, depending on your beliefs, to have eyes, and to have eyes that interact with light, and to have a body that is sensitive to light. And so the idea that this brain that's taken from a human, it's grown, and then it's not given eyes. So you'll see as we move through the data, there's a recurring theme about the darkness, the experience of darkness. And so I think, again, if we're looking at how are these brainlets experiencing their existence, I think that might be a part of it. So Claudia, do you want to walk us through some of the data that you have here?
Yes, I thought when we got the feedback, I thought maybe first that the round thing was the chip itself, what was put in the brain. But I know this was the first thing, the first page which I draw, and it was a round thing which had the white and the dark part, as if something was on the white part, shining on the white part, and kept the back in dark. So, and I know also, because Chris also talked about life energy chapter, that I felt it as something organic and live. Although here I mentioned it's artificial, so it's maybe the fact that it's that it pulls together, that it's combined. It's something, it's something artificial, but it's becoming organic, alive. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I think it was really good data. And one of the things to stress here is, because like you mentioned at first, you thought, oh, is it a chip that goes in the brain? And then it's the brain that goes into the chip. So it's a bit of a reversal. Here you had around it, there's just the dark void. And I think we might see that in someone else's data a little bit later. But again, this is a theme that we're seeing. Here you did an excellent job of describing what's going on. And so you have the lab with, the laboratory, the scientist, the investigation of something, that it has to do with this. So that was really, really good. Again, focusing on the light and dark. Tell us how you felt, especially for the experience of the people themselves. Did you pick up on their motivations, or?
Yeah, it was a very clinical white area, and there was a lot of light coming in from one side. So therefore I saw this round thing, and then maybe it's the brain or the chip. I have to read it again.
Well, we can move to the next slide, but I just think, the main things is that I thought you did really well was just,
investigating. That it is a lab, and I did not write it, but it was very. It felt as if it was in a hospital, a lab, because it was so very. Everything was white and clean.
Yes, and we'll see that a little bit later in your session, and the data is later in the slides as well, the kind of hospital feel. So I think you did really well on that. And then even here, you're just oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, I've looked at Claudia's sessions, obviously over the months, and it's just interesting because people who are skeptics or whatever, right? Claudia, I think this might be maybe the only time or the second time that you've drawn like a lab environment like that. Is that correct in your session work? Like, it's very rare for you to kind of pull that kind of information. And so the reason I bring that up, that rarity, is that it's fascinating that on a subject where that is extraordinarily relevant, right, you're able to pull that piece of information through. So this would be a skeptic saying like, she always gets labs, right? So this is just, and it's like, no, she almost never, if never, gets labs. So it's like, this is, she's very much on target, right? This is the conversation between me and a skeptic, right, that we would have, the argument, right? And I just find it to always be so fascinating. And everybody's work is like that. Like each of these pieces that Sasha is pulling out and showcasing for each individual here, these are not typically repeatable components across many different sessions, right, that I've seen from the viewers. And this is just, I don't know, remote viewing is so cool, I guess, is my summary. But I just wanted to point that out for Claudia because it's like, that's my observation.
Thank you.
And you did an exception. I mean, all the sessions were exceptional. But for some of you, these were your best sessions I've seen from you, right? And so it was interesting to see the connecting with the target and getting that kind of data. So yeah, I agree. The other one where you had a lab, it was also extremely accurate information, and that was when we were talking about the hand purple, the creation of hand purple as an elixir and as a pigment, and it was accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so here, you're talking about perpetual motion, and we'll talk about the energetic aspect in a little bit. But this is really good data that it moves, it can move steadily, it can change, it can move faster. That's all accurate. It's all correct data. So this is really good. And then here, Claudia, you also have the balls. Yeah. So that's really good. And the feeling of a bloodstream. So you're bringing in the biological there.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And so then, Chris, you're talking about the life energy. And so this, Claudia starts touching on this, that idea of this perpetual energy, and then you're bringing it forward as well. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about this data?
Yeah, before that, I just find it fascinating that everybody got the small balls because, I mean, it's a basic shape. So in general, you would get like circles in remote viewing, but the fact that everybody calls them balls is a bit weird because like you would say like a circle or then that kind of stuff. And everybody came up with the term balls, which is funny, but okay. So yeah, I find that very, very interesting. But so here in my session, I was in a place where I was probing for something open. So I was not probing for a specific thing. I was asking you to give me something relevant to view. And what I got was the feeling about a projection of some type where the small becomes bigger and bigger and the same image becomes available in higher definition. So I got the sense of a replication, that it felt like a hologram and that it's a real thing, but it's not there physically at the same time. So physical and not physical at the same time, which if we're speaking about consciousness can make a lot of sense. And so, yeah, I sketched a bit that image in the image in the image in the image projecting something at the end. And I asked all of this, why is this relevant to the target? And then, yeah, I wrote that it's the turbine of reality. It's the link between the macrocosmos and the microcosmos, the thread, which is the life's energy. When I was writing that, I was like, yeah, that's a whole load of bullshit. But now I find it very interesting because if there is some kind of sentience inside of that chip or that model, I mean, this is really defining consciousness. So I find that very interesting.
100%. Yes, it is. That's my thought exactly as well when I saw this. And I think, and again, I said it to Cody, and I'm saying it to you as well. And everybody did this. I was really, really happy to see everyone in this group have the courage to do this. Is what you just said, Chris. You're writing something and you're like, this feels cheesy, or this feels but you trust, right? But you trust the method, you trust the process, you trust the data stream, and you write it down. And this is why we do that, because when you do that, the data comes through, it's correct, it's accurate, and it's helpful, because this is giving us an insight that we have no other way of gathering. This, I think, is a perfect use case for remote viewing. You know, a lot of people do remote viewing, they get the training, and they don't really know what to do with it, because either their ability is maybe not as developed, and they just can't get information that's maybe reliable. But here we have data, and we can see in your sessions, you're accurate, you're precise, you're on target, you're giving us information that we can trust, and you're telling us something that nobody else can tell us, right? You can't, there's no other way of probing these brainlets. Especially because we wouldn't get access to them, but even the scientists themselves, yes, they have a vested interest in telling everyone, oh, there's no conscious experience at all. These are just little brainlets. Don't even worry about it. But we can have a voice. We can say, this is what we're seeing in the data, and maybe we need to pay attention to that. So yeah, so I'm grateful to everyone for trusting their data and including it. And here's where it gets really, I think, delightful. This is the amazing part of remote viewing as a group, is you get these corroborations of data to strengthen it. So Chris, if you were the only one that had this sense of a hologram, then that's interesting data. But when we see Cody drawing the exact same thing, it adds that extra kick of interest, I think. So Cody, why don't you tell us about your experience of it here?
I got no idea. That was at the end of my session, and I was just going back through, like, see what I've missed, and then yeah, I had a really strong visual of that, and that's when I started thinking, like, what's going on here? I don't know what I'm describing, but yeah, it just seemed like kind of like Chris said, but it felt more like a barrier to me, like something that you could move it, like you could push on it and it'd spring back, and maybe that's symbolic about what it does to the muscles and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And you also had, so the barrier idea, we're going to see everybody has the fence or barrier in their session. We'll see that shortly. And then in the same way that Claudia had artificial, you have this idea of it's constructed, and then you have the hidden. And Chris had that idea right here, right? Like a kid hiding in a corner. And we're also seeing that aspect of something hidden in your data as well. So Chris, when you see this, do you find that interesting to see the parallel here with your data?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, to come back to this kid hiding in a corner, it's like the kid doesn't want to be there. So maybe that says something about whatever would be in there. And also to come back to what David was saying earlier with the lab setting in Claudia's session, I think it's one of the first time I'm using the word hologram in my sessions. So that's also very interesting to have somebody else that has the same thing for something that's very unusual for me.
And it's an interesting choice, concept, the hologram. Go ahead, David.
I was just saying, yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, because you know, it's hard to track all that information of viewer sessions. You know, I have some degree of awareness, right? But so it's good that you brought that up. What about you, Cody? Have you ever? Is that the first time you came up with that kind of term, or has it come up occasionally?
Yeah, I not in a session before.
Wow. See, that's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, and so again, how do we construct an understanding of the world around us? And then how does a brain that doesn't have eyes, that doesn't have hands, how is it going to make sense of the input that's coming in from the muscle tissue, from the neurotransmitters that get flooded into its system that makes it respond and react? So really, really interesting data here. And then, John, we're back to you. Here you have the life forms organized in a circle. And again, what I'm seeing in the data is that it doesn't look like these brains are all sharing a consciousness or sharing an experience. It really does feel like they're separate. Chris, you were talking about how everyone seems to be describing these balls, and they're very specific about that. And as we look through the data, I would ask the audience to kind of look for this particular concept, which is multiple life forms. Everybody's alone and everybody's having a weird experience, and there are other people around them, but they're not part of them. So that, I think, is really interesting, that they're not, that there isn't like a cohesion, that these brainlets are all experiencing themselves in isolation. Yeah. And I wanted to say, John, your data came through so beautifully here, where you're talking eating aggressively. So that's, soaking up the nutrients that the brains are put in, light leading to a smile. So again, it seems like it's not enjoying the experience of darkness. If when there's an experience of light, there's a positive response. And then passage is controlled by someone. So again, it doesn't have control over its own motion, right? It's being imposed, induced. And then it feels like a prayer or a sacrifice to God. I think there's a lot of ways to interpret that, and I think it's really profound. And I just wanted to know if you wanted to say a few words about that.
I had that come up like 3 or 4 times in some form or fashion, but essentially it was like the idea of like, I don't know, like a subject, offering something up, or I couldn't tell if it was a prayer or a sacrifice or what it was. But yeah, that the first time I got it, I wrote it down, but it came back like 2 or 3 times. Again, that's nothing I've ever had before in a session. So that was really interesting. I didn't really know what to make of that, but now it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And, I see it in multiple ways. I think it makes me kind of want to join the protests against this, this kind of research. But, I don't want to say too much about this, especially on YouTube, because I don't want to get the video taken down. But, I would suggest people who are interested in the topic look at where they're sourcing the brainlets from, in terms of a sacrifice to a god, or a sacrifice of some kind. And then there's also the idea just that the researchers become the god, they become the creators of this thing, and they become the ones that are controlling it. And then, and sacrificing it to further their investigation, right? And so I think that there are a lot of ways to interpret that data. Mm-hmm. But I just thought that was beautiful data, so I really liked that. And then Cody, you even gave us the color of the red tissue, the red muscle tissue. I thought that was really good on the grooved. And again, the muscle tissue, the muscle fibers, right? And so the grooving of the muscle fibers. John had the same data point as well. You drew it and he had it written, but it's the same underlying data. And Chris, you also had the heavy red color. And then Jeff. So Jeff, this is such a quick little sketch of exactly what the target is, right? You have the connector point, you have the brainlet, and then you have the environment around it. So did you want to say something a little bit about that before we have more of your data coming up? Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
So that little string sort of coming off the end, a connection of some sort is something that just reoccurred throughout my data. So I hadn't really noticed it in that version, but there's a rope, a connector somewhere throughout all my data. So there it shows up again.
And I saw that as well with John's necklace around the head that actually looked like the bracelet. So for him, it came through as a necklace, yeah. And then Claudia, you had you had the figures dancing, and they're repeating the same dance from left to right, from left to right. And again, if this thing is experiencing some level of conscious awareness, and it's just being made to repeat the same motion, expand, contract, move the paddles together, move the paddle apart. Right? It's kind of cruel to put an awareness through just that basic repetitive motion. Cody, you did amazing work here. The electronic current running through a fluid, a gel-like, and feels like it can change the structure And that's exactly what this is, right? So I thought that was really good data. And then tell us about this, because you drew it so perfectly, so well. You have all the elements in your sketches. You have the purpose of it as advancing technology. Do you want to say a few things about this?
Yeah, that like I said before, that was the first few pages of my session. Yeah, I was just moving around, and then it just looked like a microchip. So I just wrote it down and sketched it, and I kind of moved on because it come through way too good. You know, I always get a bit sus when it comes through that easy, but yeah, it just felt like it was some sort of technology.
Yes, and I think that that's a good point to make. There are some rules that we use when we're beginner remote viewers that you actually have to do the opposite when you become a more advanced remote viewer. And one of those things is when you're beginning, you know, they say if you see anything too clearly, you're wrong. If you feel like you know what it is, you're wrong. Don't name it, but as you become a better remote viewer, there's a point at which you're starting to see things clearly because that's what it is, right? Or you get the name of the thing when you're looking for words because that's its name. So I thought that was really, really interesting in your data. And then here, Jeff, you have all on the same page. You have the organ, right? It's like a kidney or something. But I see it as an organ in the body.
Mhm.
And then you have the spiraling shape. I see this as the brain. And then you have the twine, the connecting connection thread. And I put here data from Chris, who's also seeing downward motion. And we saw this in John's waterfall motion downward. And for Chris, it comes through as like a river downstream. So again, we're seeing these very similar data points. Jeff, did you want to say a little bit about this? Because I thought it was so nice to see you had the components all separately on one page. And when you put them all together, it's just describing the biohybrid robot.
I'm not sure what else to add. When I first drew the twine, I'm like, is this DNA? Just because it's a helix, and I just kept saying, no, no, no. It's not. It's just a connection. It's not information. It's just a connection.
That's funny because DNA is, you know, these are the genes that allow you that express how your body is going to manifest, how your face is going to look, your personality, how aggressive you are, your impulse control, your intelligence. All these things are heavily influenced by your DNA, right? And so this is a little brainlet in a vat, essentially. It's not going to have a body. It's not going to have a personality that we are aware of, although it kind of seems like there's something developing along those lines. So I think it's interesting that it has DNA, it is biological, but that resistance to that idea because the DNA isn't fulfilling its function. I thought that was really good data. Yeah. And then Claudia, tell us a little bit about this, because you had really good data here. Again, you have the balls, the motion, the circular motion, but you had this idea of the bloodstream. So again, you're picking up that it's biological. And then you had the idea of a heart. So how did that come through in terms of the biological aspect?
Well, I saw it again against a black background. And yeah, I saw something round. And when I sketched it, during the sketch, I made this movement as if it was a closed circuit, because earlier I draw it and it was open, but now I know, oh no, it's closed. So yeah, and then I really came back to the health issue. So therefore I mentioned the blood and the heart and something pumping and doing. Yeah, because now the sketch is gone. But,
sorry, I'll bring it back for you. But
yeah, it was fixed. Yeah, in the fixed way, and that was all the time during the session. The feeling, I cannot go right, left, or whatever. It's one movement.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
one.
for me, this hurts my heart actually to read this idea that frustration, it can't move to the right, it can't move to the left, it can move, but only in a very prescribed way, in a very prescribed direction of motion. And so
Yeah.
again, that's what we're doing to these brainlets.
Yeah, and I mentioned that another force was initiating it. So that's then
Yeah,
probably the chip. Yeah. Oh yeah. Two. One attracts, one repels.
yes. The force of nature, right? They're hijacking the biological energy to power their chip, essentially.
Yeah. And I saw something. I didn't name it, but all the things with the graphite. I saw the black magic metal things.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you did pick up, right, the correct motion. You have all the basics here. Really good data here. And then again, we have the balls. And then even here, you're seeing it, John, a control board, an array of buttons. It's a control board for a machine that's going to do something. And in this case, it's these brainlets are the control for the muscle. So really good. And we see as well, Jeff, he has the balls as well. You had Jeff, the 3, and then the bigger enclosure. And then again, under cover of darkness, that hurts a little bit when you keep seeing this concern with darkness, this not enjoying being in the darkness. And then even here, John, I was really pleasantly delighted with this piece of data, removing a piece from a larger object. So you're really picking up on the structure, on the physical description, on what it is that this is. So that was really good. And then here we had Dixon, John Dixon, talking about it's hard to completely harness or contain this due to its awareness of choice. So again, that idea of there's an awareness there, and it's limited and it's constrained. Extremely energetic. This reminds him of a counterpart. Again, that motion away towards. That's the only motion it's allowed to have. And then he talks to us about the internal aspect of the target houses or contains a biological entangled presence or subject of some kind. That's a perfect little summary there. So that was great work from John Dixon on that. Yeah. That it holds information, right? So there you go. There's your brain. And then John Dixon had a little bit of the information coming through together. So he has the spheroid, which is the motor neuron spheroid, the idea of spheres, the balls. And in the balls, he has these internal interlocking arms. So this is the interlocking arm. And he's even drawing the machine itself, right? The device or the chip itself. So I thought that was excellent data. And of course, as he's describing this, he's talking about the sense of awareness. So that was really, really good. One of the first few data points in his session was that it's some kind of a bioorganic, that there's energy motion involved. Both Cody and John Dixon are talking about the same kind of rubbery. A few of you talked about spongy, rubbery. These are kind of themes that came through to a lot of different people. Cody, you also had that idea of biomotion. So everyone was just really on target here. Really, really good sketches as well. And then, so we talked about some of the kind of poetic way that John, your data was coming through about a sacrifice to a god or something along those lines. And John Dixon brings in this idea of there's something biblical, something that's being sought after. Reminds him of a hidden or forgotten artifact in an old attic. So again, we're seeing that idea of it's hidden, and Cody it's concealing, and forgotten artifact in the dark in the attic. So again, we're seeing something sad a little bit. And Dixon gives us the word bruised. I do wonder then, is it experiencing pain from what's happening? Right? If it's being repeatedly made to expand and contract, do the investigators care if the muscle tissue gets sore, if it feels bruised? I don't think that they do. He also tells us that he gets this feeling of what he's describing is curious about why it's in here. And he puts, I can't think of the word in English. It is in here. So it's not a he, it's not a she, it's an it. But that there's something weird about that. And so he's picking up on, I think, exactly this, that this is a brainless. So we're not calling it an animal, a person. It's less than a person, but it's more than an it. So I thought that was really amazing data from Dixon on this.
Also,
And so-
Sasha, in the, I think the previous slide to that one, the one before that, I think that one there with the spiral. Sweets mentions that the loop with the enclosed spiral made me think of the Hadron Collider.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very good.
Oh, yeah.
And so here we have Dixon talking about hidden, forgotten in an attic. Cody talking about concealing. Chris talking about a kid hiding in a corner. John storing something, keeping it secure and hidden. So everyone's kind of touching on that in an interesting way. And then here's, again, more from Dixon, bioorganic energy. And he keeps bringing back this emphasis on it's an it, but it's not quite an it, right? That there's something there that keeps coming back for him. So I think that's a really good communication of he's picking up on this idea of the artificial, but also biological aspect of this target. And I really liked here, he's talking about the stretching and the muscle stretched and all of this. Rendered past 2D, meaning it's not actually 3D, but it can be altered to become those options. I see this as the brain. Right now it's two-dimensional in the sense that it's not in the world. It's just on a chip. It can only move, expand, contract, this one paddle of muscle tissue. And so it's not really living a three-dimensional life with the body, and it's not in the three-dimensional world. And so I think that was just really, really surprising and amazing data. And then here, Claudia, again, you're talking about the force of energy, organic, alive. Do you want to say something about this data?
Yes, it was a bit of a blurry thing. So later on, when we got the feedback, I thought maybe this was then the brain, because I saw all these things, and well, something was influenced on that. So and I started to see some some foamy effect. It was very strange sight, and yeah, it holds a key to something. Yeah.
And you have the 3, right? You have the 3 balls here, 1, 2, 3, and then
Emotion. Emotion, yeah. Well, I remember also that they looked, in former times you had these, you had such a game, such knickers. How do you call them? These small glass balls, but we also marbles, yeah. But sometimes you had these small metal balls, like from a bicycle, inside the bicycle, from real, and these were worth a lot. So because you always won the game when you had these small metal and they look like that, very small, and metal. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
very good data. And then Chris, or no, this is Jeff. Jeff, here are your sliding doors. So we talked about John's doors earlier. And so here are yours at the entrance, trepidation about the safety to enter. Do you want to say something about this a little bit?
Not sure what to add other than open, close, open, close. So you only have 2 options. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a repeating theme through everybody's work.
Yeah. And so then here, Dixon gives us synapses, little electrical circuits. That's perfect. That's exactly what this is. So that's amazing. And then Cody draws these little electrical circuits. So really, really good correspondence there between the 2 of you. And he picks up on this idea of charge, discharge. So again, door open, door closed. So that is coming through really well for people. People are getting really accurate data. And then one of the things I saw in John's data was sparkly. He said he had it in a few different places. And I was looking at this, and yeah, sometimes they do use optical methods to activate the brain tissue. And so then when I saw it, Jeff, in yours as well, I thought, oh yeah, I think that's correct. So here we have Dixon picking up on the scientific, biological aspects of the target. And so in Cody, we'll see a little bit later, you had the gel. For Dixon, it comes through kind of as well, biological. And he has the 3 balls again. So we keep seeing these 3 balls as being central. And so that's really good. And he describes this as transcendental organisms at birth. And that's exactly what these are, in the sense that they're transcending their human nature to become this robot machine. Yeah, so really good. He has the word evolucent. I really like that, actually, this sense of transcendent evolution. He's kind of combining these terms because it's not evolution, and it's a structured, controlled transformation of biological matter to something different. So I just thought that was really, really nice to see. And then here, Jeff, you had the heart of stone. So a heart that doesn't feel, a heart maybe, that's, yeah, you just kind of kept in part of your session, you kept feeling that and bring this data back. And then John, I was wondering, because you had the feeling like a prisoner at the mercy of someone else. Can you talk about that, how that felt, or how it came through?
Yeah, I was. I think I was probing for emotion, or maybe not. Maybe that just kind of came out. I can't remember, but I remember the perception distinctly, because it was kind of the idea of kind of like I was kind of on my knees and just kind of like under someone else's control, and whatever I'm going to have to do, whatever they ask me to do, and I really don't have a choice. That was basically the perception I had.
I find that troubling. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
The other thing about drawing a heart was the very first slide on your tasking is a heart with heart muscle. So I just thought it was interesting that, okay, I drew a heart. Pat myself on the back for that one.
Yeah, definitely. And the meaning there is that the heart is a spontaneous muscle contraction, relaxation system that you don't have to force it to beat. It just beats on its own. And so they use that as an analogy of like, oh, this is why we don't have to worry about it having consciousness, because it's just like your heart, no consciousness, it just does its own thing. But we know that that's not actually true. And so, John, your data, feeling like a prisoner at the mercy of someone else, it hurts my heart a little bit to see that data, because I think in the context of your session, you're on target, you're getting good data, you're getting accurate data. You're getting the correct overlay, you're getting the correct interpretation of your data. And so when I see something like this, I trust that this is good data. And that, I think, is upsetting, to think that these people, investigators, scientists, researchers, they're treating these as though they have no conscious experience. And clearly we're seeing that it looks like they do. And so here, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's quite profound, the statement there, right? And again, to me, because I look at things in different levels, and so I just think about how different types of remote viewing data contribute to the conversation, right? Where typically CRV kind of has to me, a little bit more limited scope of what they accept, essentially, especially for beginners to bring in, like you mentioned previously, right? But that information is more like a very complex conceptual piece of information. You can still get very beautiful, profound information through a visual complexity as well. So it's not like necessarily one form is better than another. It's just to say how interesting it is to see something like that come through in a conceptual way, and the impact that can have. That may not be quite as easily translated or expressed through maybe a visual or some other format, right? And so it's just an observation. I just find it interesting. Even the Heart of Stone too is the same same kind of thing, right? It's kind of bridging two elements, which is more of a physical element along with the conceptual, right? So it's a hybrid. But yeah, I don't know. Just my observation.
I also read the Heart of Stone as the researchers, the investigators that are dealing with these brainlets. You have to have a heart of stone not to have any qualms about doing this kind of research. So yeah.
Emotional detachment.
Right, exactly. That's what they push. Ah, that was one of the, I do, little aside from Sasha, that was one of the, I think, hardest things. I remember, so I think as a society, we do have to talk more about what's going on in sciences and academia as well. I remember in my stats textbook, it was stats for psychology at that level. And they kept using a mice on a hot plate as the analogy for everything. So they would want us to, do a statistical analysis on this data, but then the problem that they would give us is you have a mouse and you put it on a hot plate and you've given it this many doses of this painkiller, and then the control mouse has no painkiller. And then we count how many times the mouse jumps on the hot plate. And when does it stop jumping? When does it just give in to the pain? And I remember complaining to the professor saying, like, I would like to use a different textbook that doesn't talk about torturing mice, but they just don't care. They're so inured to it because as you go through your degree, they just keep subtly influencing you in these ways. They use these kind of examples unnecessarily to get you used to it. I remember working in one lab and I quit because they brought in a box full of mice and I could see their little noses. They have all these holes in the box for air to come in. And their little cute little mice noses would be poking when they were trying to figure out what it was. And I was kind of like visiting with them and they were super cute. And then I discovered what they were going on to do. And at the end of most of these studies and investigations, they always cut the mice open at the end. They always cut their brains open, put them under microscopes, they count different things, and then they write it up in a really sterile report and they publish it, and nobody cares about the mice. And so I think now that we're not just like, to me it's morally offensive that they're using mice, but now we're stepping it up. Now we're using human brain tissue. And so I think that this might be an important conversation to have. I think your data that you've submitted, all of you, is important data. And I hope a lot of people see this and start thinking about it, because I think it is an important issue. So anyway, I'm very sensitive about this. But so everyone kind of talked about the temperature. This thing clearly does not like being cold. It prefers being warm. And everyone complains about, being cold. I don't like being cold. I kind of seen this in the data. Everyone's happy when it's warm. And so Dixon it grows agitated when it's cold and temperatures are applied. And there's an absence of heat. It really doesn't like that. So that's something, if there are any of the researchers on these types of projects that are watching this, please warm up the chip for the brainlets so that they're not suffering from the temperature. And then this was amazing data, I think, to remove the physical and non-physical color from perception. That was a concept that just came through as an idea to Dixon. He feels like everything is uniform, as if gray and white and black is all I can see. And again, these brains are designed to have eyes for input to come in through the eyes, and these ones aren't getting any of that input. And they're clearly noticing that there's this unhappiness with that condition of not being able to see color, not being able to see properly. Here we come into the idea of weapons, biological warfare research. I do wonder, they might tell us, we're just looking to see if we can do this, just to see if we can. But it does seem that they are moving this towards weapons research. If they can, they've had rats fly drone-like military planes. And so I do think that this data is suggesting that this is one of the goals for this research as well. Dixon did really well in his summary of like this idea of duality. There are two wolves, which do you feed? So again, it's the machine or the brain, which are you nurturing? This idea of biological chemistry, fabricated, not naturally produced or constructed. So this echoes, Claudia, your data about the artificiality of it. And then here again, I think is a call to action maybe for us. It's a lot of ignorance is bliss population relying on safety provided by higher societal governing bodies. We just trust that there's some ethical board somewhere that's making sure that this kind of research is being done safely or morally, ethically, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And so I thought it was interesting that Dixon was picking up on that. He's also picking up on it can be turned off. Does it have a choice? Does it have an option? It's programmable. So he just really great target contact, Dixon, really great data. And Cody, this is your side view beside the machine itself. Again, just really good sketches. And then Jeff, here you are, the protest. Here are the brainlets. They're soaking in blood. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
So a little bit about how I do HRVG. So Glenn is the one who taught most people who do HRVG. And when he would talk about how he does sessions today, he essentially writes the tasking down on first sheet of paper and then sets it aside and basically kind of ponders it for 24 hours before doing any work on it to kind of get that connection made. And that's sort of what I've adopted into doing. So my first page I usually call pre-work. So it's whatever comes to me after I write the title down the first time. And usually it's just, okay, pre-work, the tasking, and my name, and then I just set that aside. This time, this picture came in hard, fast, right away. It was like, I couldn't stop, I had to draw this. And it was one person, I said, one person with paint or blood, and one person with a camera. So making a very bold, loud statement and protesting in context, I would say almost two things. It's, hey, should we really be doing this type of research? But also protesting that, hey, why am I the only one protesting? More people should be thinking about this. So
yeah, great.
Intensely and very quick. I haven't had something like this happen before. This was really intense.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Do you think, because Jeff, you've done future events, do you think that there could be a future event tied with this target that might relate to this?
That's not where my mind goes. My mind actually goes to, am I picking up on Sasha's view of this research and should people be more concerned about it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sasha alone in her cowboy boots. And it's funny because when I set the target, I didn't have these ideas. I didn't, I was like, this is really interesting research that they're doing. And I remember a couple of years ago reading about the brainlets and being a little bit outraged that they were doing this. But when I came across this article, I don't know, it didn't trigger that outrage. But when I saw everybody's data, I just feel so heartsick about what might be happening. And I want to note here, so I had to cut because I don't like things to be too small, especially if people are watching this on their mobile phones. So sometimes I'll just kind of, if there's a page of data like here, this was all on one page, but I cut it so I could make it bigger. But I cut out where you describe the boots as cowboy boots. So again, these are the Westworld that John was talking about earlier, the cowboy boots, that cowboy connection. So I just wanted to mention that. They got cut out. Dixon, again, the biblical sought after, he has this word transgressive, right? And again, this is the moral dimension of this type of research. He also has this idea of age and time. And so there's something, I think, about the experience of time passing that is starting to come through. There's not enough data through all the different sessions to really pinpoint, but that as a project, that may be I would probably follow up on that aspect if I were doing this as a project, because everyone's kind of mentioning time or clocks or an experience of time. So that's something that might be interesting. And then he says the internal aspect of the target houses contains a biological entangled presence or subject. So again, that idea of there's this conscious awareness in there. And then moving forward for moral dimension. So back to you, Jeff, because then you have Adam, the creation of man, which is really interesting in the context of this target.
So creating a new type of man, yes.
Yeah.
Is the goal here to build artificial people that with biological parts?
And you know, people say, oh, if you get a brain implant, if you get the chip, then you become enslaved to however they want to program you. This is an even, I think, more horrifying reality where they don't even give you a body. They just have these brainlets on these chips. So I just thought this was fantastic data for this. And even, you know, you can see here, your Adam here doesn't have a face. He doesn't have a head. He does,
Yep.
right? So he just has the body that he needs to move the machine, but he doesn't have a face and personality. So yeah, I thought this was amazing data, Jeff. And here you're talking about blood. Because we've seen blood in other targets and other information, there does seem to be something about blood that is more important than we're told. And I know that a lot of ancient groups believed in that the magic is in the blood, right? And the data is in the blood. And so I just wanted to ask you how the data came through for you, how you experienced it.
So I went down, when I submitted my first section, I said, I really went down a rabbit hole here, and I'm not sure how applicable this is to the target. And I actually wanted retasking. I think my second work is actually more on target. So, but why did I go down this rabbit hole for this target? When it comes to a chip, the blood is sort of missing. You're just breaking it down to individual neurotransmitters. You're breaking it down to be less human in a sense. So if you're doing that, do you really know what you're doing in the grand scheme of things?
Yes, amazing. Yes, I think that's the correct interpretation. Does anybody else want to chime in on this?
Yes, I just wanted to discuss the fact that there's no blood, because as I saw it, it's just this bio hybrid. It's just a small chip to help you in things. So as Elon Musk is now doing it, if you are having Parkinson, that he adds this. But now we are talking about whole new robots. So, and then, okay, then I can understand you don't need blood. So maybe I was on another thing.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because it's the development of that kind of technology and that kind of approach. And I think, Jeff, I think you're right that there's more to it, and that by taking the blood away and just having these brainlets sitting in this sludge, there's something more to that than what we see at the surface. And Sweets is grateful that I do try to make the images bigger for people watching on their phone. I'm glad that helps, Sweets. Yeah. And so then here again, Jeff, you have the language, the information in the blood, cache of information that's protected, valuable items, and this idea of returning later to reclaim. So I think it's just really interesting how you're interpreting that. And then here's your cowboy. And again, you can see the brainlet and then the connection, right? And we saw it in John as a flower. We see it. So the natural element, but at the same time, you see the stem, the cord. We always see that in a lot of the data.
Well, I'm going to put the cowboy out in a little bit different direction as well. So cowboys herd cattle. Is this treating bits of your brain like it's cattle?
Very good.
Very good, yeah.
And the other thing, with the protests, in the future, if there's any protests associated with artificial intelligence in the human brain, kind of like of any sort, right? The idea that they might dress up as Westworld characters to do the protest and make more of an actual point, like that actually completely makes sense that you might see that. So anyways.
Oh, yeah.
Are you giving people ideas, David?
Well, Jeff is apparently, so they need to give him credit when they do that.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it is a good point, though, of the hurting of the brain parts. I think that's good. Here we're back to Claudia again. We're seeing the 3, 1, 2, 3, the 3 brainlets, and then these waves with the dots. We're going to see this in a lot of other people's data. Chris, as we're going to talk about your data in a moment as well. But so Claudia, I think it was really amazing that you had this sense of, you're looking at surroundings, you have the sense of astral traveling. Astral traveling is traveling without your body, conscious awareness without a body. And so that, I think, is a perfect description, apparently, of these brainlets maybe.
Yeah, I'm not muted. Yeah, I really now feel it again, like I'm trapped, because when John mentioned with that he felt as a prisoner, I think the whole thing also felt for me like that, because I have another page also with a lot of information that I'm here, but I'm not here, feels. And then also the astral traveling, like you're not really here. So I think that's the feeling when you're a biohybrid, something that's not really aware of things.
Definitely. Yes.
Just controlled.
And we see it here in this idea of not real, fantasy, that there's no sound, out of body experience. That's exactly what it is. It's a brain without a body. So fantastic data there. And then you have the word tricked, and we're going to come to, I think, yes, more of your data here on that. You have this on a few of your pages, that idea of tricked, a cover-up, unreal, something is staged. That came through really strongly in this section of your session. It is not real. Can you tell us a little bit about that so that we can figure out what is it that's not real? What is it that's staged?
Well, it was a very strong feeling that everyone is being tricked. So I don't know, maybe they falsify the outcome, or I also had the idea that it was again that various lands or countries are working on this, and that they come out with an outcome, and that it's just not true, that they just try to make this how do you call it in English, that they try to
They're hyping it. Hyping it, but it doesn't
they try to
work.
be the first ones, but it's just not true.
Yes. Yeah. And so I wondered, and this is why I wanted you to talk a little bit about it. And I think we have other data coming forward in the next slides maybe. But what is the trick and what is the lie? Is the lie that this works without problems? Because if the brains are suffering, if the brainlets have some kind of experience, if they're unhappy and they're suffering, are they exhibiting some sense of choice? Because that's what we saw in Dixon's data. He kind of keeps coming back to this idea of choice. I wonder if sometimes the brainlets are choosing to refuse the commands of the neurotransmitters that they're being injected with. Do they learn to say, I will move the muscle tissue when I want to, not when you try to force me to? So I wonder if sometimes it acts unpredictably. And so that would be evidence that there's something more to this. And so if they are acting unpredictably, then I would see that the researchers would want to hide that from the people who are funding the research, because they don't want necessarily people to start asking questions about why is it refusing to behave in a predictable fashion that neurochemically it should. So if it's not, and there's no reason at the neurochemical level, then the next question is it refusing because it has will? Does it have sentience? And so that's the one interpretation. And then the other interpretation is, is the trick that they're saying these things are not conscious, don't even worry about it? And is that the lie? Is that what's being staged, that these are all just brainlets? There's no thought in this little brainlet. So it's interesting. But I do think
the letter, it feels more like the letter, because I feel an empty feel, but you feel trapped, you know, all the other things in an alternate, you feel in an alternate universe, but you're not there. So I think that there's still some life in it. So,
yeah.
but it cannot do anything.
Yes. Yeah, that seems to be what the data is converging on. Yeah. And so there, you know, your sketches are really, really good. Claudia, you really have the automatic writing aspect well mastered in your sketches, because I see again and again you do these sketches and a lot of information on multiple layers comes through. And so it's really good. You know, I see the muscle tissue, the striations as muscle tissue. And we're also going to see it in Chris's data with a slightly different meaning that's equally valid. We're seeing these peaks, right? Here are the 3 brainlets. Jeff is also picking up on these beats, and we're going to see this, I think, in a couple slides. So we'll come back to this.
Okay.
Chris, here's your man. Tell us about this. This is the sadness. This is the heartbreaking. Give us a little bit of an insight into the data.
Yep. So I was probing for life and energy, and I drew this weird looking, very thin person. Then I thought, come on, is that an alien target? It's a gray. And I was like, no, it's not a gray. So I didn't put anything about aliens in there. And the perceptions I got were that it was very thin and it was very neutral. He was observing. He had a role of observing. He had a job. He was on duty. And so that's what I wrote. So I put, he's observing. It seems to be his job, but he's not that passionate about it. Why is he here? It's his duty to observe and report. It seems to be kind of a mission in the shadows. And he doesn't have a lot of emotions, like sense neutrality, but still with a bit of sadness. So it was, the perceptions I was receiving were not that he was like super unhappy, but it was not happy at all. It was really like static, but not so happy to be here.
And I think that what's important to note here is that these, you know, especially when they're using the midbrain, any time where they're moving towards areas of the brain that are involved in emotion, but they're not giving them the neurotransmitters that normally trigger an emotional response. So again, it suggests that there's emotion that resides in our conscious experience that maybe is separate from our bodies. And this is where I think Claudia's data about astral traveling, out of body experiences, we know that when we're having, and remote viewers, if you have a bilocation, you see 360 maybe degrees around you. So you know you're seeing without your eyes, that your consciousness has some means of seeing that isn't reliant on your eyeballs and your retinas. And, you know, I think the idea of having emotion when you're not outside of your body, again, we're taught in our mechanistic worldview that your emotions are just chemicals in your system, and that these chemicals get released, and then that's why you have an emotion. And without the chemicals, there's no emotion. But clearly that's not the case, because when we're out of our bodies, we can have emotions that are not reflected in the neurotransmitters. Does anybody else want to say something about that while I pick up my mouse that fell on the floor?
Well, I'll read. Michael in chat mentions that Claudia's idea of tricked makes me think the brain itself being born to learn and assimilate this big world, but that's all been shrunk down to an artificial and impoverished world.
That's so heartbreaking. Thank you for that, Michael, because I think you're right about that.
But yeah, in terms of these concepts, I do think to a degree that part of what the session work from the viewers could be kind of articulating is
Yeah.
The presence or the observation through the target of the same capability that they are using to collect the data about the target itself. Essentially what Sasha said, which is to some degree, these biological brains may be able to perceive beyond their physical constraints and without having eyes or mouths or any other things, right? And so it is an interesting concept, and to a degree, I think at least the viewers are hinting that that may actually be the case. And so it's something to consider.
Yeah, definitely. And Jeff, the face, if you look at Chris's, the face, I didn't put all of the faces you had in your session in the slides, but you did kind of have these recurring faces, and there's a little bit of a similarity there. So I thought that was, I wanted to bring that up.
I think you did put it in a later slide.
Yes, okay. And then John, do you want to tell us about this? Because you're also drawing a thin man.
Yeah, I don't know what that, I mean, on the left, that sketch, I tried to get a visual, and that's the best I could come up with right there. So like, I didn't know what that was. I thought it was nothing, but it does kind of resemble that for sure. And then, yeah, storing something, keeping it secret or hidden. Yeah, just that's what I got. Just that idea came through.
Yeah. I do wonder, at some point in my analysis, I had my psychic little abilities tingling. But I wonder if part of what's being kept secret or hidden is, I wonder if the brainlets are keeping their consciousness hidden from the researchers to some extent. If the researchers think, oh, this particular brainlet is having conscious experiences, so let's destroy this one and start with a new one. If it's, and how would they know? They would know if the brainlet is refusing to respond the way neurochemically it's designed to respond. So if you put the neurotransmitter and it refuses to contract the muscle tissue, then that defiance would lead to its annihilation, right? The destruction of the brainlet. They would say, oh, this one's defective, so let's just grab another one instead. So there's something, I don't think it's precisely that, but there's something along those lines that kind of that feeling was coming through as I was moving through the data in your sessions.
Well,
and then,
Sasha, the other thing that his data would potentially support is the idea that you had previously, which is the lie might be that they're using this for weapons technology research and not actually for any other reason.
Yeah, that's good, right? Yes. Yeah. And then, Jeff, do you want to talk to us about this? This is such a nice little sketch of what's happening.
It's what I saw. So essentially a person, some sort of a tether to a space station. That's how I interpreted it. But yeah, it looks a whole lot like that side view.
Right. And also it's the man in space. It's Claudia's, actually projecting person, right? He's out in space, he's untethered, except for this one line to the brainlet. The body is just out there, right? So I just thought that was really good. I really like that.
One thing on that just this is probably not that relevant, but when I saw this on the slides, it reminded me of when we did the hill target. I had one of my perceptions was the idea of like an astronaut just floating in space, and just kind of the idea of the consciousness, just kind of like floating out there. So anyway, when I saw that, that's what reminded me from a previous session on a different target. But anyway, thought that was interesting.
Excellent. No, that's an excellent insight. Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, because I think you're right about that. And then here again, Jeff, right, you keep having that. It looks like DNA a little bit as well. So I do agree with you there. You have it as scar tissue. And then you have the faces, the brainlets coming through, the sense of three. We keep seeing that in everybody's session here for the three little brainlets in this little design. You had the stone heart, and then you have the stone image of an animal. The stone image of an animal as a metaphor for this particular target, I think is really, really good. And then the idea that all three figures are the same image. So they're all the same, they're three identical little brainlets. Did you want to say something about this one?
So when I was doing this, I really didn't understand what that those lines were, what I call scar tissue. And now I'm still not sure if is that muscle? Is that a connection between the brainlet and the muscle? But that was just a reoccurring theme in lots of different ways. So if you look at as a leash, it seems like more of a connection as opposed to the muscle itself.
Yes. And as a leash, right, you have the animal on a leash, you're controlling it like a pet.
Yes.
So again, right, there's that connection there. Really, really good data here. And then, so this, this is kind of amusing because Dixon had this idea of Jurassic Park research in his session. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I know what he's referring to. There's this quote from one of maybe the first Jurassic Park movies, the old ones. You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think whether or not you should. And that's the I don't know, the Jeff Goldblum character says it about scientists that are building hybrids. They're taking dinosaur DNA and they're putting it in frog eggs. Jeff, that's your frog face. But they're in your data, but they're putting it into the frog DNA and then they're creating these dinosaurs because they can, and they don't think about the ethical implications of it. And so when I saw that in Dixon's session, I thought, oh, that's such good data. And there's also life will not be contained. Life breaks free. Life finds a way. And in the Jurassic Park movie, that's the idea of you can sterilize it. You can put it in a pen. You can take away its limbs, its body. You can pretend that it's not conscious, but life finds a way to express itself, to experience itself. And so I think there's something really profound there. And then it was really funny because Jeff, you have this ancient fish and just a Jurassic era fish type of thing. And you can also see there are resemblances between this and the machine, the brainlet, the connection to the muscles. So you could kind of analyze it on multiple levels. But everyone is talking about fish. Fish and birds. So Claudia, you put a tiny little fish in here in between the brainlet and the motion. And Chris, it's like a fish from the bottom of the sea rising up. So this thing that, it's coming up from the depths. I think that it was just a funny connection that everybody's telling me about fish. And then John, for you, it's more like a birdhouse. But again, you have the thread, the connecting link like we see in Jeff's session a lot. And then you have the brainlet, and it's contained, and then the natural life, the bird, the expression. So we'll see more about the birds later, but here I just thought that was kind of funny. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about this, Chris?
So that's part of my timeline. So where I was describing what's happening at the moment and what will happen in the future. And so on the left side, it's what's happening right now. So people are taking the time now to realize and acknowledge what it is, and it's like a shock. So basically, if at some point it's officialized that there is some kind of consciousness in there, then this makes sense. So that could be what's happening at the moment. I mean, in this time frame. And then for the future, I saw lots of disturbance, but something will be built around it, positive or negative, I'm not sure, but it will become part of like the norm, apparently.
I think that ties into the military research, the military usage, the secret weapons that they're developing based on this technology. Maybe that might fit. Yeah, but really good data, Chris. Your timeline, this particular chapter, you do it really well. You get really good past, present, future data. Yeah, I always look forward to that section of your sessions. And then we have the human brain organoids as energy source. So Dixon's talking about free energy, protected secret. And this ties into, Dave, what we were saying about the military research. This is why they would use it, because you can use human energy and then you don't need the battery. You just have to have the right chemical soup of nutrition for it. He has a core of a tangible object. So the midbrain is it's the more central part of your brain. It's It's not the thalamus, but yeah. It just made me think of the Matrix, where you see all the bodies being used as a battery, and so as an energy source for the machines. Isn't that what we're talking about? So that was a really funny little connection. I thought it was really good and relevant. And then, you know, Jeff, you had the bee and the bee blood and the goo. And again, it's that idea of the hives and their drones, and they're doing work for the queen bee, but they don't have their own individual, you know, lives or freedom. So I put it on this page because I felt like it was maybe relevant with this kind of thing. Yeah. So this idea of the warmth, the temperature, energy source. I think there's something there. So I thought that was fun data. Repeating, replicating, multiplying the sponginess, so that the organoids. This idea of insulation that's fiber-like, that's the muscle tissue because it's muscle fibers. This is Dixon's data. And then he feels like he's watching a million fire ants swarm a piece of food. Again, to me, this suggests that the biological components are not experiencing a sense of unison. They're not coming together as one individual, that they're really feeling themselves isolated. So I thought that was interesting data. And then, John, you have green light go, large network of pathways or circuits connected. So again, great data here. And these objects that seem to move out of openings into different openings, this motion through, you can see that here there's like there are these reservoirs. And so there's the images that I've been showing are kind of the simplified version. But if you go and you look at the actual academic journals and you look at the actual pictures, it's a little bit more complicated, but this is the main idea, right? So they do have the reservoirs where they have the nutrients, the soup for the jelly soup for the brains to live in, and all of this stuff. So I think you're picking up on some of this stuff. And then Jeff, the eye is a gemstone, it's translucent. So again, that idea of not being able to see, maybe wanting to see. And then we saw in John's data earlier the explosions. And so you also, so there's some people that correlate with each other. So we're seeing Dixon and Cody. There's a lot of correlations in your data. Jeff and John, a lot of correlations in your data. And Chris and Cody as well. There's some nice little mirroring there. So I thought that was really good. You're picking up, Jeff, on modern technology meets ancient tech. Humans is the ancient tech.
Okay.
Right? And then this idea of lab-created crystal, I think that actually fits, right? And then everybody's telling me about these fences. Everyone's telling me about this crosshatch, the fence, the protector, the barrier. I was wondering if that was like just the muscle tissue.
I would interpret that as muscle tissue.
Yeah, okay. And then your cowboy hat, now that we have John's interpretation of the West world, it's an added element to this, because I think that's actually quite good. And I do think, I agree with you, Jeff, the muscle tissue, because in John's, he's trying to figure out, like, what is this? And he gets a sense of something that's keeping everything inside. And when you see how these are built, the muscle tissue is stretched out, and then it's being made to contract. So, Jeff, you had ornate, bornate, cornate. You're trying to figure out what is this word. You're sounding it out. And you know what I think it is? Incarnate. Right? Because it's embodied. Just putting it out there, something to think about.
Yeah.
When I look at it now, I would say it's more about the ions that trigger the muscle to contract.
Oh, tell me more.
In my frame of reference, I would say it's more about a chemical being used to cause something to happen.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Because that's how they're making them work, right? They're injecting them with chemicals in order to trigger the reaction. And then, Chris, we're going to get to this right now, because you have this mesh, but you have it as waves, as sound, as signal. And so tell us a little bit how this data came through, because we're going to look at it through the lens of Claudia's session sketch that we saw earlier, having to do with staged and trickery. and her biological experiment where she has this as well. And the 3 little 1, 2, 3. So Chris, tell us about this, how this came through for you.
From what I remember, I kind of first drew the part on the right, so the parallel shapes, and so I had the impression that it was some kind of fence preventing intrusion, and then I got also the feeling of a signal like a sound frequency, and this parallel thingy got me the impression of like how sound waves look like on a screen. So yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of that. But when I look at it like this, it kind of looks also like the shape of the whole thing again. But yeah, in terms of sound frequency here, yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, so I tied it to brain signals. Actually, I think David and I were talking about it. And in our conversation, I think we both converged on this idea of, I think he's talking about the brainwave patterns. And that fits because it fits if you're looking at this image here of the different brainwave patterns, the heartbeat, the brain rate, the respiratory rate. So I think for me, the idea of it coming through as a sound frequency, I think that's fair because the brainwaves are hertz, right? So essentially, it's very similar.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then go ahead, David.
Another thought, and I don't know if this actually aligns at all with the work, and it may not, but from my perspective, I'm not quite clear that the brain itself would be enough to culminate consciousness, personally. However, if you see the brain as a biological antenna, the concept that it might be able to tap into the conscious data stream. So if we think about it less as like a personalized identity for each brain, but more like an actual receptor of consciousness, like random consciousness, then 2 things come out of that. Do the remote viewer sessions, draw any ideas on antennas, transmission, reception, that kind of thing. The second thing would be in terms of weapons research, if that line of thinking has any kind of value whatsoever, the potential that they would use that as a way to collect data like a remote viewer would do, but from a perspective that would be much more sophisticated. I don't know about sophisticated, but a different approach that allows for a different point of access and maybe more consistency that they would like to see. That becomes a possibility. It's just a weird thought that when I look at all this information, it makes me wonder a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you're right about that idea of the antenna bringing in the consciousness. I think there's definitely something to that, and the data might support that. I also wanted to bring to your attention the underlying motif, the underlying pattern of data in Claudia's session here. We've seen that in Jeff's, where he has the red circle surrounded by the dots. And then we're seeing it here in John's data as connection points for movement. So I think that's interesting as well, right? Because the neurons connecting to the muscle. There's just something here where I think that this tells us a little bit about what we're talking about. And then when we're seeing it here, Claudia, in yours, that's where you're talking about something being staged, something being faked, we're being misled about something. So I just think, really good data. It comes together in a really nice way. And then, yes, so here, this is more of your data, Claudia, because we have these points that we just saw in John's session. And again, so you have this, Claudia, and then you're talking about a kind of a chart. So I think that supports the idea that these might be brainwave charts.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is very, I mentioned there sandy hills because I saw it as one color like sand, but it was difficult to grab what it was. But yeah, I saw some kind of chart, so it was a square. But the whole thing is that if I'm not there, you know, if I'm in another state of mind, if I'm lucid dreaming, I try
Yeah.
to grab something and then it was again like it was gone again. Like, so maybe that's the feeling of the brain, you know, the piece of brain, something afterward. That
Yeah,
you try to make
definitely.
something of it, but you're just cut off everything.
Yes. Yes. That's why I think your data here is just spectacular, right? You have this idea. It feels as if you're being in another state of mind, like a patient who's lucid dreaming, a medical patient. You're strapped down, you're in the hospital, you can't leave. They're lucid dreaming. I think that idea of that lower maybe but level of consciousness when you're not moving your body, but you're having an experience of it. It's not me. There isn't that sense of identity. Being in an alternative universe, being here but not really. All of this is spectacular data. I think it's really, really good. And so I think this, for me, really brings it home that I think that's a valid interpretation that these things that we are talking about, the brain charts. So I think it ties all of this together in a really nice way. And then we get, Cody, did you want to talk about this? Because it's such a perfect description. There's like fluid inside this and it's hydraulics, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about with the muscle tissue.
Yeah, all this sort of stuff in me session it felt like it was a hydraulic system that had an electrical current in it, and it moves and changes the shape and all this. So it makes sense after seeing the feedback, but it was really hard to describe. But yeah, somehow an electrical hydraulic system.
And that's exactly what it is, right? That's a great.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, no. Okay. And so again, I think, yeah, very, very good. And also, again, there's this idea of spiraling. We can kind of see in Dixon's weapon. And Jeff, you had this by the organ and the twine, the connector. So I think that spiral motion is interesting because it keeps coming through. And then everyone is describing the scientists, engineers that are working on this. Something happened here. So, Jeff, you have this bird-like creature. And again, I think that this is a little bit of automatic drawing where we can kind of see the connector to the muscle tissue, the brainlets, and then the connectors, right? So like there's a little bit of that automatic writing that gets the motif coming through in your drawing. But Claudia, you're talking about this Russian who's doing this research. And it's a very similar drawing to Jeff Bird.
Yeah, I really saw this beard, and the mustache. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's probably something here.
Funny.
Yeah. And I think maybe more analysis might bring something else in because there's, you have this peak of his eyebrows in a V, and that's the V of the beak. So I just think there's something funny there that probably better analysis or more analysis would carry something out. But I do think, Cody, I think you're seeing, even the glasses that he's wearing, the microscopic glasses, when they're dealing with the really small little spheroids, they're small, and moving them around and connecting them up. I think that's an amazing sketch. And also he does look a little bit Asian, and they are, it is Chinese researchers that are kind of at the spearhead of this type of research. And it matches with Jeff's face as well. So really good data here, everyone. Really nice. And then I wasn't sure if Patrick was going to join us, but he also picked up on this as kind of a landscape form. And so then everyone was talking to me about fish, and then later everybody's talking about birds. And so that's why I think that there is something to the bird here. There's data there that we'll have to think about. Because John, something reminds you of a bird. You've mentioned a birdhouse a few times, and again, you can see that the connector, and then maybe the brainlet. So there's something there. There's Jeff's bird. And then Claudia, you see a flag, part of a dragon on it, but then you also see maybe like a wing. So again, you're bringing in the bird kind of pattern of data. So I thought those were, and John, your bird, I think it came in relation to this idea of testing for safety or functionality, maybe. Or maybe this is in relation to Claudia's. So Claudia, tell us about the hospital that you saw, because I think this is probably where some of the main research is being done.
Yeah, well, I saw it rather standing alone, and it was a big glass wheel, a building, and well, you could not look into it, but you from inside you can look out. Well, there was a helicopter, but I felt a bit away from areas because I saw a lot of green. It felt a bit hidden. So I also looked at it, and it was the research which is done in America is a rather busy area. So I wondered whether this maybe was in a different country.
Yes, because I know that the Chinese are working on it, and I'm sure that the Russians are working on it. And I'm sure that there's some research being done on this in the Middle East as well. And often what the US will do is they'll do part of the research in their country, but then some of the applications of it that are maybe more for the military that might contravene some of the American population's ethical sense, they tend to do that in other countries where they have labs. And so does anybody want to comment on the birds, the motif, how you feel? Do you have a sense of what that might be or mean? Any insights at all? Not really. It's a bit of a mystery. Okay, we can move on.
What's the company that actually is doing that? Is it a lot of companies, or is it like a few companies? Because maybe it would be a good thing to look at their logos or their names.
Yes, yeah. Some of them are affiliated with universities, and then some of them are, if they're doing it for the Department of Defense, then you won't necessarily know which corporation is helping to fund it. But I do think it's a good idea that we should be looking into the research that is public on this, find out the logos, and you might find something, a nice link there. That's a good idea. And so then, again, data from Claudia about it being faked. It's not what people are being told it is. It's not about medicine, about the world, about most things. So there's lies about all these things. So yeah, and just here I just wanted to kind of show the correlation here. Again, Claudia, you have the 1, 2, 3 and then mirrored, right? So that keeps coming through. So yeah, really nice little automatic data coming through. And then Chris, here are your scars connecting the past to the future. That biological aspect, that slicing. You know, Cody, you had the knife, the cutting. So I think that there's something there that maybe the experience of slicing all the things apart. Did you want to say something about the data here, Jeff?
So somebody discovering something that was so amazing, nobody would believe it, and they didn't know how to present their data. That's kind of the gist of this guy. It was like he found a stone tablet with the 10 Commandments, present day. It's like, nobody'd believe you. What would you do if you had such amazing information that nobody could believe you? Is there some discovery here that's not being discussed just because it's so unbelievable?
Yes.
In a whole bunch of different directions.
Yes, I think that's really fascinating as a concept. What is being discovered that isn't being shared with us? And then the truth builds its own prison walls, barriers, opposites. So I think that there's a lot there to decrypt and decode. And then here is Cody, if you want to talk about the gel a little bit. Jeff, you also, or John, I mean, you also have that sludge, thick substance that's causing resistance in the movement. Yeah, if you guys want to talk a little bit about how that came through, or
Mine was pretty
Yeah,
much exactly how I described it. I felt like the idea of whatever this liquid is trying to move in it. It's just thick. That was about it. I didn't know what it was.
yeah, it's a similar with me. Like, it's probably the muscle tissue or something like that, but it come through with that kind of electric hydraulic sort of stuff, and it's probably the muscle tissue, and it just come through that way.
yes, yeah, and they grow it right in the soup of nutrients. So yeah, I just thought that was a nice little correlation in your data. You use very similar words and ideas because you're both talking about the sludge and resistance and motion, and this idea that it has to do with motion is in yours as well. So just nice correlations. And then yeah.
Sasha, going back to the bird thing, a search. So I don't know if this is related or not, but I'll just bring it up. Search on this topic shows that PigeonBot, a biohybrid flying robot that incorporates real feathers to mimic bird flight, is basically used by Stanford University, and it's called Bio-Inspired Research and Design Lab, which translates to the acronym BIRD. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Can you share that on screen or put in a comment? Also, is there like a weird shaded square in the bottom right of your screen that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I accidentally hit keys that does weird things. I think it's wanting to put a banner there, but I'm just going to ignore it for now, but I apologize for that. If you want to share that, David, or even just send me a link and I can share screen, it's up to you, but you can share screen as well if you want to, because I think that that's interesting.
It's just at the moment, that's all I have is what I just communicated, but I'll put it in chat.
Yeah, I think that's a really great find. Yeah, fantastic. And so then Chris, Jeff, you have the idea of the puzzle, solving the puzzle, and then you have it as a palette coming through. So I think there's a lot of data there. I can kind of see underlying symbols to it that are meaningful. Did you want to say a few things about that?
The one on the right is one of the things that made me really wonder, is this DNA? And I kept getting, no, it's not DNA. So is that the muscle fibers and one of the brainlets?
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely. And so let me put this in, or you can put it in comments if you want to, David, but I can as well. But just the bird, Stanford's Bio-Inspired Research and Design Lab. So that's why we're seeing I put it to Twitch. Oh no, it went to YouTube. I think that's where the bird is coming in. So that's, it's fascinating how that happens. Oh, there are comments. We can see the comments there. That's what's happening. I would like to not have that. So if someone can show me, here. There we go. Sorry, I'm learning technology as I go.
Yeah, I noticed that too, that you can hit show on this. I just saw that today. Yeah.
But I think that the idea that the acronym is BIRD and everyone's coming through with birds in their sessions, I think that it's one of the amazing parts about remote viewing, right? I think that it's playful. There's that playful aspect to it. Claudia, I wanted to commend you on your timeline as well. Really good. 2025, the point of breakthrough, and they start their research in the 80s. I think that's actually fairly accurate, actually. So really, really well done on that. And then, you have it as a math equation. So there's science, something like that going on. The mirrored figures, I think that there's more to that. But I think even just on a superficial level, we can see the design of the muscle tissue in the petals, and it's expanding and contracting.
I couldn't make sense of it either, the mirrored figures, but
yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
The mirrored figures remind me of, so I had a drawing that I described as hieroglyphics, and it was symbols that didn't quite fit together, then it sort of looks like those.
Yes.
I have no idea what that is in relation to the target, but there's something there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do light analysis for the live stream. Sometimes I do a little bit more in-depth analysis. So like on the Surabune UFO off the coast of Japan, I did more extensive analysis on that, more research. For this one, I didn't do as much. Just time and health kind of is always what sets limitations on the level of depth that I can do for these sessions. But I do think I wish I had the health and time to dig deeper on this one, because I do think that there's more to this, the mirroring aspect in particular. And Jeff, your hieroglyphs, it ties into blood to a certain extent as well. So I think that there's data there that, you know, you can kind of touch on. But to really present it, I would want to show backing evidence to say this is where this idea is coming from or how I'm supporting this idea. And I just don't have that today. So I'm going to leave it at that. But feel free to do your own research.
Yeah, I will look into it again.
Yes.
It's interesting.
If you
And
push the
also-
first two together, there's a heart.
Oh, yes, that's right. You have the
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah, that's
And then
interesting.
the upside down pyramid as well. I mean, we saw the pyramid in John. We saw it recently. His birdhouse is always in this little pyramid shape. And the beak is the pyramid shape. And again, there's a lot we could say about that we won't, because we're on YouTube. But you can do your own research. Even Jeff's pyramid here, right? So yeah, I definitely think that there's something to that as well, the heart and then the pyramid. And then the
And I
butterfly.
was thinking, sorry, can I say something? I was thinking about Jeff, that he mentioned that there's something coming out what was not, what was astonishing, right? With like the 10 commandments. And I was thinking maybe the fact that the brain still works, although you cut a piece of it, you know,
Yes.
something that's of course, that would be, if they find that out and they hide it for us.
Yes. And like even on the most basic level, so you have the heart, and then you have the pyramid, as above, so below. The downward facing pyramid is the below, but it's also the womb. And so it's also that idea of fertility, and that ties into Jeff's creation of man, but this is an artificial creation of life. So that's where the inverted pyramid symbolism comes in. And then the double threes, the 33, that is the butterfly, the MK Ultra, the manipulating consciousness, all of these things, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I think that the mirrored figures that you have here, I actually think that this is really significant data, to be honest. I just don't want to say too much on YouTube.
Okay.
That's what we have. That's all the data. So now tell me what you guys thought about that.
It was pretty cool. I should have done a bigger session. I'm doing small sessions recently, but still, I mean, it was very cool. I liked this target because it's very different to the normal kind of target we get, and it's something out of the ordinary without being esoteric. So I thought it was really interesting.
I'm so glad you feel that way. I do try to keep you guys on your toes a little bit. When I start feeling like, okay, they have my kind of pattern figured out, I try to throw a wrench into it. So I'm glad you appreciated that. And in terms of the shorter session, you were on target and you were giving great data from the beginning. So I think sometimes a short session is fine when you're getting high level data and you're getting accurate data. And also, I would rather get a short session than no session. So like, I think it's good that you're able to say, I only have this much time. I don't have time to do a full session, but I'll do a little session. I'll send that in. Right. And you still hit all the, like your future, past, present. That was very valuable data. Your collaborations with other people's data. So yeah, I thought you did an excellent job. Yeah. And I think as well for other people, you can, well, I don't know I won't speak for other methods, but for FSI, right, like Claudia and Chris, you're always free to just do chapter 1 and then see, okay, do I want to do chapter 2? Do I want to skip straight to chapter 5 just with what I have in my chapter 1? You can kind of pick and choose and just do those chapters that you feel might provide relevant data. And sometimes you start doing one, maybe you start doing a map, and then you realize, I feel like I don't need to do this. And so then you just stop. Okay, I just felt like I didn't have to do that chapter. Or sometimes you feel compelled to. I find sometimes, especially if it's for locations where you're looking for something, you're looking for someone, sometimes as a viewer, you'll feel that like, oh, I feel like I really have to draw a map for this one, right? And so I think it's listening to that and letting that help guide what sections you're doing. Yeah. And everybody else, what did you guys think? How was it? What did you think of seeing all the data together?
I like the target. I thought it was a lot more interesting once I saw everyone's data than because I wasn't really familiar with that idea. I mean, the idea, yes, but like not that they were doing it. And so I kind of didn't really know what to think of it. But then once I saw the data and then going through all, everyone's overlaps and everything, it's really interesting. I love getting different targets. That's kind of how I was trained. Like I wasn't trained on a lot of like, I think the typical targets that I see a lot in groups. So I love getting just completely off the wall targets because I feel like that's the best way to learn and to advance. So I really appreciate that target. It's really cool.
I'm so glad. And your data was exceptional. It was so good. I was really pleased. And it just came through in a really poetic way, which is really nice. Everyone here, you're all great remote viewers. It's always exciting to do the live streams because I love seeing all your data and to see the progress and the advancement, to see the group effects kick in. Like that's one of the things I'm seeing, John, is I'm already seeing the group effects with your data. So for some of the people who've been participating in the live stream, it took a couple months for some of that coherence and some of that resonance to come through. And I feel like we've definitely hit that for your data. And that's nice. I think it's nice.
Yeah, it was an amazing subject, and I really liked it a lot. And when you're ready with it, you always think, what is a target? So I could not have thought of this. So yeah, it's amazing when you check it then, and okay, did I say that? Because in the meantime, you are 2-3 weeks further, and I don't know anymore what I've written. So yeah, it's really nice to see also that you proceed. But one target is more easy. You pick up on one target much more than on the other one. So yeah, it's nice to explore that for myself also. What is ticking? Hey, oh, my cat is
Your cat. No, I can't. Or your cat meowing. Do you think, Claudia, like this is one of your top sessions? Your TED Serious photography was amazing, but this one I think is one of your top sessions as well. You had amazing data and very strong coherence. You were really telling the whole story and telling the story throughout your session. Very little noise, and when I say noise, like a lot of you aren't getting irrelevant noise. You're operating at a level of skill now where noise just means it's still on target data, but it's maybe adjacent to what's most relevant. You know what I mean? So you're really embedded in the data. So it's really beautiful to see. So I was really happy to see that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the others, anyone wanted to say something?
It was fun.
I'm surprised how much data came out of what seemed like a very simple target to begin with. Lots of layers.
It's always good to see the different ways it comes through for people. I always like seeing that.
Yes. And one of the things, this to your point, Claudia, sometimes we get these ideas of, oh, I'm good at this kind of target, but I'm not as good at those kinds of targets. And I think sometimes you surprise yourself and you realize, oh, I am good at those kinds of targets, right? And so I think, when John, you're saying people should do kind of more unexpected targets. If you're always doing UFOs, then do something completely different. If you're always doing future technology, then do something completely different, because I think you can surprise yourself and just expand your range. David, what was your kind of overview of the data?
Well, again, I agree that I think everybody did an amazing job. I agree with Jeff that the idea that, because when you look at the target just intellectually, you'd say like, oh, well, what can they really get from that, right? But there's quite a lot of overlap and levels to that information. And I also agree with Cody that I'm the same way. I love to see all the different little pieces of information, how it comes through somebody's one person's perspective versus another, right? The quality of the data, what that looks like, you know what I mean? I just find it to be fascinating because I'm more highly analytical. The other thing I was going to mention for the public who's watching, but also to the remote viewers here, is that we're going to experience a G4 severe geomagnetic storm on June 2nd, coronal mass ejection kind of a thing. And the reason that that's important to note is that there has been evidence that severely affects a remote viewer's ability to remote view. So I'm suggesting it to the viewers here that if you have any targets you're planning on working, either maybe don't work them over the next 3 days, because like it's the peak is the 4th, and then the 3rd it's still kind of severe. So it's like you might want to wait till like a little further out from the 4th, or 3rd or 4th day, but June 3rd or 4th. But if you happen to say like, I don't believe in that, which is fine, or you want to do a test, right? Because that'd be another reason. If you happen to do a session, see if it tanks your session or not, right? So I'm just throwing that out there as well.
Yeah, good insight. Thank you, David.
Good to know. Checking
And
it
so,
out.
Yeah. And so everyone did brilliantly. Your data was amazing. Again, I said it earlier, but I'll say it before for the new audience members that are watching at the moment. I really love to see that you're trusting yourselves, you're trusting the data. I think that that's really giving you amazing results, right? That you're just trusting the process. You're all working really hard. You're putting effort into your sessions. I appreciate it. I find there's so much value in what you're doing. I hope that our live streams are generating conversation, making people think. And one of the things I always think for videos on YouTube, you're not just talking to the audience today, you're talking to the audience 3 years from now who are going to come back and stumble on your video and say, oh, what's this? And so I think it's as much for the future audience as for the current one. And I did want to share this as well, because for the audience, because I am here, I do this analysis, I present my opinions. And I wanted to say, if you want to see my remote viewing work, if you're wondering, Sasha, you're analyzing everybody else's, you're talking about everybody else's, but from what position are you doing so? Because a lot of our videos on our Mint channel are from old sessions, because I'm slow at editing. David's fast, but together, we're not always doing videos about sessions we've done recently. And so I just thought, okay, if you want to kind of get a sample, we are coming out with the session that I did for the lunar eclipse in March. I'm really excited to share that. That's going to be fun. It's on the hill from the telepathy tapes. And I kind of referred to it a little bit in our last month's live stream. And so, so I'm looking forward to sharing that, because that's current work. But also, I recently did blind target. It's always, the targets that David and I do are always blind. So sometimes we don't mention that because we take it as a given that of course it's blind. It's remote viewing. If it's not blind, it's not remote viewing. It's something else, right? But we do know that in the community, the term remote viewing is starting to be applied to work that's not done blind. And so we're realizing that we do have to specify that this is a blind session. Everything that you saw today, that was all done blind. I didn't give any category cues. I didn't give any information to these viewers.
Yeah.
They did exceptional work completely blind. I just gave them the target code. That's it. And so that's what you can do with remote viewing. When you keep practicing and you apply yourself and you really believe in what you're doing, I think you can achieve these heights of skill. And so if you want to see a little bit of my skill, you can wait for our video on my session on the hill, or you can go to Rumble and check out the Kiwi Joe show. He had a group target, so I didn't know the other people in the group. It was my first time meeting them. I don't want to say the target on YouTube because they'll take our video down. But it was really interesting, fascinating. And then I applied the same type of analysis that I do for these live streams, but I did my in-depth. So what you see in the live stream is my light analysis, sometimes done over the course of the week leading up to the live stream, sometimes done in the course of the all-nighter that I pulled to get everything done the night before. So it depends on how my schedule is and my life in general. But for this one, I did a full spectrum analysis of my data. So if you're curious about that, you can check it out. I do offer analysis for remote viewers who want the service. You can sign up for that through our website. You sign up for a consultation with me. And then we can talk about how many pages of your work you want analyzed or whatever. And so I just thought I would take this opportunity. Let me share the other screen so that you can see the Rumble. There were a number of other viewers. So if it's something that you're interested in, is it allowing me to share a screen? Yes.
I think you also put it on Facebook, right? With a link. Because
I did.
I viewed it. Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm going to probably put a shorter version on Patreon for our top tier patrons, so that they can get a sense of what the analysis is, what my data looks like. But if you don't want to wait for that, and if you do want to kind of see the full presentation, it is on Rumble, the Kiwi Joe show. And it's this one here, Remote Viewer Uncovers Hidden Cellular Disruptions behind the illness whose name we can't say on YouTube. So it's the first one here with the orange cell. Yeah, so you can go check that out if you feel like it. There's also, we did an interview, David and I, with Kiwi Joe, with Gerard from the Kiwi Joe show, and it was fun. So he put that up as well in a couple parts. But you can check that out if you feel like it. Anything else that we want to say before we close out? No.
Thank you for all your analysis. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It was fully in depth again. Yeah. So thank you.
I'm glad you appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate it. And I get excited. Sometimes even if I tell myself, like, I don't have time to do that much this month, so I'm just, going to kind of allow the viewers to just talk more, and we'll just kind of see. I always get so into it, and it's so intriguing, and it's so magical to see the connections. And then I'm like, oh, I just won't sleep. I'll just keep doing that. Yeah. It's so much fun to see your data come together. And also, I just really appreciate all the work that you're putting in. And I think I see the benefits of it. I can see your work progressing. I can see your skill getting stronger. I look at your sessions from a year ago. I look at what you're doing now. I think remote viewing you get better the more you practice, if you're practicing in the correct way. And I think if you take advantage of this and you look at other people's data like you're doing, it really helps you understand the process. Like John was saying, Cody was saying, seeing your data in the context of other people's data and seeing how something comes through somebody else, through their different personality, their different interests, it kind of, I think, helps to kind of make sense of, when I see this is how my consciousness is interpreting it, and this is how it's interpreted by somebody else's consciousness. It kind of helps you understand the raw data a little bit better. right? And that process of making meaning from the raw data. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the audience. I hope that this was fun. I hope that it was interesting. Let us know in the comments below. Do you think these brainlets are experiencing some kind of sentience, some kind of conscious awareness? And if so, what are we going to do about it? Are we just going to allow these researchers to keep letting these consciousnesses suffer or not? Yeah. So that's all. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much, everyone, and good night.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.